In the waning light of the ancient world, where the forests grew thick and the soil still carried the memory of old bones, there existed spaces that were neither here nor there. Doorways, narrow paths where three roads converged, the silent thresholds of homes and tombs alike. These were places where the ordinary world met the unknown. It was in these liminal spaces that Hecate first stirred, her presence threading through shadow like smoke curling from an altar. She was not announced with trumpets, nor heralded by kings. She was known in the hushed corners, in the glances cast over shoulders, in the quiet fear that comes before twilight. To the people of the ancient Mediterranean, darkness was never empty. It was a vessel, a passage, a mirror of human uncertainty. Hecate's emergence at crossroads was no accident. The intersection of paths was a place of choice, of hesitation, and of consequence. Here one's footsteps might summon the living or awaken the dead. And so she lingered, her form half seen in the candlelight, her voice the wind rustling dry leaves, a whisper in the dark reminding mortals that some spaces are sacred and some are perilous. Her earliest mentions appear in the scattered fragments of Hesiod, where she is described as powerful, one who works her will from heaven to earth to the depths below. She belongs simultaneously to the sky, to the fertile soil, and to the shadowed underworld, an impossible trinity that mirrors the human attempt to understand the cosmos. To the ancients, Hecate was both a guardian and a guide, a deity whose dominion was not about creation or conquest, but about vigilance over thresholds, the points where one realm brushes against another. Crossroads, doorways, and gates were not merely physical locations. They were the stages of transformation. A child on the cusp of maturity, a warrior stepping into battle, the mourners carrying the dead to the tomb, all passed through thresholds. And there, standing unseen yet ever-present, was Hecate. She did not demand obedience, nor did she offer comfort easily. Her presence was a reminder that life and death, fortune and misfortune, the known and the unknowable, are always intertwined. In iconography and ritual, she was often depicted carrying torches, keys, and daggers. The torch was not simply a light for the night. It illuminated choices and consequences, exposing shadows that the eyes alone could not perceive. The key, delicate yet heavy, symbolized the unlocking of doors that separate worlds, the passage from ignorance to knowledge, from life to the beyond. And the dagger, a symbol feared and revered, was a reminder that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed lightly. Each of these symbols is a story in itself, a tangible trace of human longing to navigate the uncertain, to negotiate the hidden structures of fate. To understand Hecate's role, one must understand fear itself. Not the fear of monsters or storms, but the quiet, existential fear that accompanies uncertainty. In a world where the causes of illness, death, and misfortune were often invisible, and the whims of the gods inscrutable, humans sought patterns, signs, and protectors. Hecate embodied this need. She was the ever-present observer at the edge of understanding, the divine witness to choices made under the heavy cloak of night. Her worship, while never as centralized as that of Zeus or Athena, was profoundly intimate. Small shrines adorned crossroads, offerings of food and milk left to appease her attention. A coin, a bowl of honey, a lock of hair, gestures born not of extravagance but of desperate hope. Through these acts, mortals acknowledged the fragile boundary that separates the mundane from the mysterious, the living from the dead. Hecate's favor was not demanded. It was negotiated in silence and reverence, in the trembling weight of expectation that accompanies every step taken into darkness. There is a peculiar human resonance in her dominion over thresholds. Every life is defined by moments of transition. The step from childhood to adulthood, from ignorance to insight, from grief to acceptance. In ancient Greece, these transitions were sacred, often marked with ritual and prayer, yet shadowed by uncertainty. Hecate, standing at the crossroads of these passages, offers a reflection of our own internal landscape, a reminder that every decision carries weight, that every crossing has its consequence, and that guidance is often subtle, invisible, yet profoundly felt. Yet even as her presence inspired fear and awe, it also inspired a kind of profound reflection. To stand at a crossroads was to confront possibility. To glimpse Hecate in the flicker of torchlight was to confront the unknown within oneself. She was less a deity of terror than a mirror of human perception, a lens through which we see the fragility and resilience of our own lives. In her silence, one heard the heartbeat of uncertainty. In her watchfulness, one felt the gravity of choice. The very geography of the ancient world reinforces her reach. Crossroads were often located at the edges of villages, at the borders of forests, near rivers and cliffs. These were the points where human habitation met untamed nature, where civilization brushed against the wilderness, and where mortality seemed particularly present. It is no coincidence that she was invoked in these spaces. The liminal zones, where the tangible meets the intangible, where safety gives way to uncertainty, became her domain. The goddess of thresholds is, in essence, the goddess of transitions, of endings and beginnings intertwined. Hecate's legacy endures precisely because she represents something ineffable, the silent gravity of the in-between. In modern imagination, she may be labeled a witch, a demon, or a goddess of darkness, but in the shadowed corners of her origin, she is something far older and far wiser. She is the quiet sentinel who reminds us that the world is not only what we see, that every path chosen carries unseen echoes, and that some presences, though unseen, shape the very contours of our lives. As dusk falls across ancient hills, as the last rays of sun bleed into the horizon, Hecate's shadow stretches across the crossroads. She waits in silence, not to punish, not to reward, but simply to exist where the living meet the unknown. In her, the ancients recognized a truth that remains today: that thresholds are sacred, that transitions are profound, and that the spaces between worlds are filled not with emptiness, but with quiet possibility. And so, even now, at every forgotten path, every neglected doorway, every literal and metaphorical crossing, Hecate lingers. She is the witness to hesitation, the presence at the edge of understanding, the shadow at the crossroads. And in her enduring quiet, she reminds us that some moments are never meant to be rushed, that some choices are never meant to be made lightly, and that in the spaces between, the unseen holds sway over the world of the seen. In the quiet corridors of memory, where myth and imagination intertwine, Hecate appears not as a single figure, but as three. Triple-faced, triple-bodied, she embodies a multiplicity that confounds the human mind. Her three aspects are not merely artistic invention. They reflect a worldview in which the cosmos itself is layered, in which the divine cannot be grasped in a single glance. She is moon and earth and underworld, mother and guide, protector and revealer, all at once. To the ancients, she was not static. She was transformation made manifest, the living embodiment of thresholds, cycles, and change. The earliest literary mentions hint at her triune nature. Hesiod calls her far-working, a goddess whose influence extends from heaven to earth and into the depths below. In this description, the threefold nature is implied: one face gazing to the skies, another upon the fertile earth, and a third upon the shadows beneath. Each face reveals a domain, a perspective, a power. Sky, earth, and underworld, three realms over which she presides, yet she is never divided. Her unity is paradoxical, a mirror of the human desire to comprehend the infinite through the finite, to give shape to what resists containment. Her triple form was not merely symbolic. In ritual, the ancients recognized her presence in stages and transformations. She appeared at birth, overseeing the first cry of the newborn. She walked with mortals through the struggles of life, offering guidance at thresholds of choice, and she lingered at the moment of death, escorting souls to the unseen realm. In every act of passage, Hecate's threefold gaze witnessed both fear and hope. The mother of beginnings and endings, she was a reflection of the human experience, a living paradox of nurture and necessity. Artists depicted her with three faces, three bodies, three torches. The torches illuminate her trinity as much as they illuminate the night, casting long shadows that ripple and multiply. In her presence, darkness is not merely absence. It is the space in which understanding grows, where knowledge is earned slowly and carefully. The three faces allow her to see what mortals cannot: the paths not taken, the possibilities unrealized, the echoes of choices that shape destiny. In this way, Hecate is less a figure of fear than a lens through which the human condition becomes visible. Yet the triple form also carries a weight of awe and unease. The human mind is drawn to singularity, to faces it can name, to figures it can define. Hecate's multiplicity defies this instinct. She exists in threefold vision, reminding mortals that the divine cannot be grasped through certainty alone. Her presence teaches that life itself is complex, that every moment carries layers unseen, and that guidance often comes not from clarity, but from the ability to navigate the unknown with care and attention. The psychological resonance of her trinity is profound. Humans have long recognized that life is experienced in layers, that every choice ripples outward into multiple realities. In Hecate's three faces, one can perceive the reflection of the self: the child who is innocent, the adult who labors, the elder who contemplates mortality. She is, in essence, the mirror of human consciousness, the embodiment of growth and decay, of hope and shadow, of curiosity and dread. To honor her is to honor the entirety of the human experience, in its beauty and its terror. Ritual offerings often acknowledged this multiplicity. At crossroads and shrines, supplicants left 3 coins, 3 morsels of food, 3 small tokens. Each set mirrored her triple gaze, a recognition that the divine is multifaceted, and that human devotion must meet complexity with mindfulness. Through these acts, the ancients internalized a profound truth: to navigate the world safely, one must acknowledge its layers, and to encounter the divine, one must accept its multiplicity. In time, Hecate's threefold form became a symbol of mystery itself. She is mother, guardian, and psychopomp, the one who watches over thresholds, who guides the living and the dead, who illuminates what lies hidden. Her faces are a map of possibility, a reminder that every life is a crossing of worlds, and that understanding comes not in a single glance, but in the patient unfolding of perception. As the sun dips behind distant hills and the first stars awaken in the twilight, Hecate's 3 faces appear in shadowed corners. One watches the sky, one the earth, one the realm beneath. She is both protector and witness, a presence that honors beginnings and endings alike. And in her trinity, the ancients saw not a mere goddess, but a reflection of their own existence. Layered, complex, and always in motion, poised between light and darkness, known and unknown. In her we glimpse the eternal rhythm of life, a reminder that to move forward, to cross thresholds, and to face the unknown, we must embrace multiplicity, uncertainty, and the quiet weight of the unseen. Hecate, the many-faced mother, waits in the shadows, patient, perceptive, and eternal. Beneath the world of sunlight and song, beneath the fields where harvests ripened and rivers carried the laughter of children, there existed a darker realm, quiet yet potent. It was not a place one entered lightly, nor a domain that invited the casual observer. This was the underworld, the shadowed earth where spirits lingered, where memory and fear took form, and where Hecate's presence was most profound. In these depths, she was neither distant nor aloof. She was immediate, intimate, and inescapable. Her whispers traveled through soil and stone, through roots and bones, touching the living and the dead alike. To the ancients, the chthonic world was more than a myth. It was a reflection of life's fragility, a mirror to the inevitability of death. Hecate's connection to this realm is ancient, predating even the structured pantheons of Greece. She was invoked at burials, at night, at places where the boundary between the living and the departed thinned to a fragile veil. Her torches illuminated not the path of the living, but the paths of the souls that lingered, the echoes of those who had crossed too soon, too violently, or too quietly to be remembered. Her role as psychopomp, a guide to souls, is both terrifying and tender. She does not coerce, she does not demand, she watches, waits, and gently nudges. In Hesiod and later sources, she is described as far-working, a goddess whose influence stretches from heaven to earth to the underworld. Yet it is in the underworld that her power resonates most deeply. Here, among the shadows of forgotten tombs and the whispered names of the dead, Hecate becomes more than a deity. She becomes the embodiment of transition itself, the liminal force that carries life into memory, presence into absence, form into shadow. In the rituals dedicated to her, offerings were simple yet meaningful. Eggs, garlic, honey, small tokens laid at tombs or crossroads at night. These gestures were not merely superstition. They were acts of acknowledgement, an admission that the living and the dead are intertwined, and that guidance is sought not through force, but through attentiveness. Hecate's chthonic power reminds mortals that life is temporary, that decisions ripple beyond the visible, and that respect for the unseen is as necessary as breath or bread. The whispering of the dead, the soft murmurs carried by wind through hollowed earth, was interpreted as Hecate's voice. It spoke in patterns, in intuition, in dreams, in the fleeting sense that one is being observed and guided. She dwelled in the threshold between fear and understanding, between panic and reverence. In her presence, humans confronted their mortality, their guilt, and their longing for protection. She did not erase fear. She framed it, giving it shape and context, allowing mortals to navigate the darkness with both caution and courage. The underworld itself was never a single place. It was imagined as layers, fields of punishment, halls of memory, rivers of forgetting, and caverns of silence. Hecate's presence threaded through each layer, not to dominate, but to witness and shepherd. In these spaces, the living and the dead were not opposites, but reflections of each other. The dead carry memory, the living carry anxiety, and Hecate carries both. She is the bridge, the quiet intermediary, the voice at the edges of awareness that reminds humans of their place in the cycle of existence. Her chthonic aspect is also deeply psychological. Death is not only a physical ending, it is the unknown that haunts human consciousness. Hecate's dominion over the underworld mirrors the human mind, where shadows of grief, guilt, and fear lie hidden. By confronting her, by acknowledging her whispers, humans learn to face the hidden corners of themselves. She is not a figure of simple terror, but of reflection, of self-recognition, and of the quiet power that comes from understanding mortality's inevitability. Even in art, Hecate is marked by her connection to the chthonic world. Dogs, liminal creatures who traverse the line between life and death, accompany her, their keen senses attuned to what the living cannot see. Torches flicker along the edges of darkness, illuminating what is hidden, guiding souls, and casting shadows that multiply her presence. Keys, daggers, and other tokens mark her as both protector and gatekeeper. Every symbol reminds mortals that the underworld is not a place of arbitrary cruelty, but a realm of law, order, and measured passage. And yet, there is tenderness in her shadow. Hecate does not claim the dead as subjects. She honors them as travelers. She listens to their whispered fears, their lingering regrets, and shepherds them with quiet patience. In the act of guiding, she teaches the living that death is a continuum, not a cessation, and that attention, respect, and memory are sacred acts. In every whispered wind through a tomb, every flicker of torchlight across a grave, her presence endures. In the chthonic world, the veil between life and death thins, but it does not vanish. Mortals may glimpse what lies beneath, but Hecate remains the guardian of comprehension, the whisper that mediates understanding. She reminds us that to live fully is to acknowledge mortality, that to face the unknown is to honor the shadow, and that in the quiet spaces beneath the earth, the weight of existence is both heavy and luminous. And so, in the silence of tombs, in the soft rustle of roots and soil, Hecate whispers still. She waits at thresholds unseen, guiding, watching, illuminating. In her chthonic dominion, the living and the dead are never wholly separated. They are threads in the same tapestry, observed by a goddess whose gaze penetrates beyond light and shadow, revealing the fragile, haunting beauty of transition itself. In the darkness that draped the ancient world, light was precious and sacred. It was not merely illumination, but revelation. Torches flickered along worn paths, casting long shadows that danced and stretched across walls, forests, and rocky crossroads. In this interplay of light and dark, Hecate walked unseen yet known, her presence marked by the trembling glow of fire. The ancients believed fire to be more than warmth. It was a threshold itself, a bridge between mortal perception and divine awareness, a fragile flame that could pierce the shadows but never fully banish them. Hecate's torches were her signature, her emblem, and her language. In ritual, they guided pilgrims through the night, illuminating crossroads where offerings awaited, revealing the edges of sacred spaces, and chasing back the creeping uncertainty that lies at the border of human understanding. Fire was her hand extended toward mortals, a gentle warning and an invitation alike. Approach with reverence, and the darkness becomes a canvas for insight. Approach with recklessness, and it may consume you. The ancients left gifts in the glow of her light. Food, small tokens, and prayers whispered in the wind, offerings intended to honor her vigilance. She was never a distant goddess, observed from temples with cold stone altars. She was intimate, immediate, the quiet force present at the hinge between safety and peril, illumination and shadow. The flames she carried were not tools of dominance, but of guidance, showing that the unseen can be acknowledged, approached, and respected. Her dominion extended beyond the physical. Fire and shadow are metaphors for perception itself, for the human mind attempting to grasp the unknowable. In the flickering light of her torches, one could confront fear without being overwhelmed, glimpse truth without being blinded. Hecate's illumination is selective, patient, and precise, revealing the paths one must walk, the thresholds one must cross, and the choices that shape destiny. Yet shadow is never absent. Even as fire lights the night, it casts its twin, darkness. Hecate's power lies in this balance, in the recognition that knowledge and fear, guidance and uncertainty, illumination and mystery exist together. She inhabits the liminal space between certainty and doubt, reminding mortals that understanding is never absolute, and that reverence for the unknown is as necessary as reverence for the known. Her presence in fire and shadow also reflects the psychological world of the human heart. Fear and courage coexist, intuition and reason intertwine, and every decision is both illuminated and obscured. Hecate teaches that wisdom is not about erasing darkness, but about walking through it with awareness, guided by light both literal and symbolic. As night deepens, her torches burn steadily at the edges of the world, revealing crossroads, thresholds, and hidden paths. She does not hurry, nor does she demand. She is a sentinel in the twilight, the quiet observer whose light touches the living and the departed alike. In fire and shadow, Hecate endures, a reminder that guidance comes to those who respect mystery, and that in the careful balance of illumination and darkness, the sacred is revealed. In the shadowed corners of human imagination, where fear and fascination intertwine, Hecate's presence became entwined with those who walked at the edges of society. Not kings, not generals, but women and men who sought knowledge beyond the ordinary. The healers, the seers, the solitary practitioners who moved quietly through villages and forests. In their hands, she became more than a goddess. She became patron, guide, and emblem of forbidden insight. Her torches illuminated paths unseen by ordinary eyes. Her keys unlocked mysteries buried beneath layers of both earth and culture, and her gaze lingered on the threshold of worlds few dared to cross. By the classical era, Hecate had already been woven into the rituals of magic, divination, and protection. She was invoked at crossroads, in homes, and in darkened groves, called upon to bless, to warn, and occasionally to curse. The practitioners who turned to her were not outlaws by choice alone. They were custodians of knowledge, keepers of traditions often too old or too dangerous to be taught openly. In Hecate's shadow, they discovered power, not the spectacle of dominance, but the quiet authority of understanding the unseen. The association of Hecate with witchcraft was neither sudden nor arbitrary. She presided over thresholds, the liminal spaces between life and death, ignorance and knowledge, the visible and the invisible. To call upon her was to acknowledge that there are forces in the world that cannot be tamed, only negotiated. Her favor was not granted lightly. It was earned through attentiveness, ritual, and respect. Offerings of eggs, honey, and incense were placed at crossroads, accompanied by whispered prayers and invocations that acknowledged both human vulnerability and divine presence. Yet Hecate's connection to magic carried a deeper resonance. Magic itself is a reflection of human desire to assert agency in an uncertain world, to influence outcomes unseen, to navigate chaos with insight. In guiding witches, Hecate became both mirror and mentor. She illuminated hidden paths, cautioned against reckless ambition, and demanded an understanding of consequences. Those who honored her learned that power is inseparable from responsibility, that insight is inseparable from humility, and that the boundary between blessing and curse is as narrow and shifting as the roads she guards. The human imagination, ever eager for stories of shadow and marvel, transformed her image over centuries. What began as a goddess of thresholds and guidance became, in some accounts, a figure of fear. Witches invoking her name were often mistrusted, labeled as dangerous or malevolent, and Hecate herself was recast as a patron of sorcery in the popular mind. Yet within this shift lies an enduring truth. The divine, when misunderstood, can inspire dread as easily as devotion. Her story reflects the tension between reverence and fear, between knowledge and suspicion, a tension that has defined human encounters with the mysterious since time immemorial. Artists and storytellers emphasized her connection to the nocturnal and the hidden. Dogs, torches, and keys accompanied her in depictions, symbols of vigilance and passage, of loyalty and insight. Dogs, who roamed the night and hunted where humans could not see, became her earthly companions. Torches lit the unseen corners of both world and mind. Keys unlocked mysteries that were at once literal and symbolic, tangible and abstract. In these images, Hecate is not simply a goddess of magic. She is a guide through darkness, a teacher in shadows, a presence whose wisdom is inseparable from caution. Her enduring relevance lies in the human need to navigate the unknown. Witches, seers, and solitary practitioners of the past were not only seeking power, they were seeking understanding. In Hecate, they found a deity who honored this pursuit, who presided over the spaces where knowledge and danger converge, and who reminded them that to see beyond the ordinary is to step into liminality itself. In every whispered invocation, in every flickering torch at the crossroads, she endures, a presence both protective and unsettling, a patron of those who dare to traverse thresholds invisible to the rest of the world. In the quiet, nocturnal spaces of the ancient world, Hecate remains. She is the companion of the unseen, the witness to the cautious and the bold alike. For those who walk the thin line between knowledge and fear, her light burns steadily, illuminating not just the path ahead, but the shadows within. And in her watchfulness, the human heart learns what the ancients always understood, that true guidance lies in balance, that wisdom demands reverence, and that some presences like hers are eternal. The crossroads are silent witnesses to countless decisions, each one a fulcrum upon which fate pivots. In the ancient world, these intersections of paths were more than convenient meeting points. They were thresholds where the human and the divine intersected. Here, in the subtle hush between footsteps and wind, Hecate's presence was keenly felt. She lingered at these junctions not as a distant observer, but as an intimate participant in the human experience, reminding those who paused at the fork that every choice carries weight, every direction shapes destiny, and every shadow may conceal guidance or warning. To stand at a crossroads in antiquity was to confront possibility. Travelers leaving their villages, merchants journeying between cities, mourners carrying the dead, all passed through these liminal spaces. Here, Hecate's power was tangible. Small shrines and stone markers dotted the intersection of three paths, adorned with simple offerings. Food, wine, small trinkets left with care and hope. These gestures were not mere superstition. They were acts of negotiation, a recognition that unseen forces watched, that the divine might intervene, and that the world is shaped not only by human hands, but by the attention given to those forces which dwell just beyond perception. The symbolism of the crossroads extends beyond geography. It is a reflection of the human mind, a place where decisions are measured, where consequences imagined, and where fear and hope intertwine. Hecate's dominion at these junctures mirrors the psychological crossroads that define every life. Birth and death, joy and sorrow, success and failure. Each carries its own threshold, and she stands silently, guiding those who dare to confront the unknown. In the flicker of torchlight, one could glimpse not only the paths ahead, but the reflections of their own doubts and desires, the hidden threads that link choice to destiny. The rituals performed at crossroads reveal the depth of her influence. Offerings were made at night, when the veil between worlds was thinnest, and the guardianship of spirits most keen. Coins were left in careful alignment, bowls of food were set, and prayers whispered into the wind. These acts were intimate conversations with the divine, acknowledgments of human vulnerability and dependence upon forces beyond comprehension. Hecate was not merely honored. She was invoked, her attention sought as a guide through spaces where the seen and unseen converged. Her association with crossroads also underscores a broader understanding of power in the ancient world. Power was not always force or dominion. It was often subtle, relational, and situational. Hecate exemplifies this principle. Her authority arises not from conquest, but from presence, awareness, and the ability to mediate between realms. She does not compel, yet she directs. She does not dictate, yet her influence shapes outcomes. In this way, the goddess of thresholds reflects a sophisticated grasp of the invisible forces that govern human existence, forces that are respected, negotiated, and honored. Even in myth and art, the crossroads symbolize her reach. Torches blaze along shadowed paths, illuminating offerings and casting elongated silhouettes. Dogs, her earthly companions, patrol the margins of vision, their keen senses alert to presences hidden from human perception. Keys and daggers, placed as tokens or ritual implements, mark the delicate balance between access and restriction, between the opening of opportunity and the closing of danger. Every symbol at the crossroads carries layered meaning, revealing the intricate interplay of trust, fear, and reverence. Hecate's presence at these points is also a lesson in human humility. No mortal could claim dominion over fate. Each was subject to the hidden currents she navigated so effortlessly. The crossroads demand attentiveness and respect, and in honoring her, humans recognize that guidance often comes in subtle forms. A flicker of light, a whisper of intuition, a moment of hesitation that directs the next step. To meet Hecate at the crossroads was to learn the quiet power of observation, patience, and awareness. As night descends and torches flicker against the darkness, the crossroads become more than paths of travel. They are stages of transformation. Hecate stands, vigilant, her presence a reminder that life itself is defined by intersections, by choices, and by moments of transition. In these sacred spaces, the living meet the unseen, and the world reveals its subtle architecture. And at every intersection, her shadow lingers, silent, watchful, eternal, guiding those who walk with care through the delicate web of possibility and fate. There are moments when the world feels suspended, when the air itself carries a weight that cannot be named, and when the living sense the brush of something unseen. In the ancient imagination, these moments were not accidents or illusions. They were crossings, glimpses of the spaces that exist alongside our own, the threshold between life and death, presence and absence, the known and the unknowable. At the center of this perception stood Hecate, a goddess whose power lay not in display, but in the quiet mastery of liminality, in her ability to inhabit the space between worlds. Hecate's dominion over these thresholds was both physical and metaphysical. Crossroads, doorways, tombs, and secluded groves were the tangible manifestations of liminal zones, spaces where the veil separating realms thinned. But she also existed in the mind, in the moments of reflection, fear, and intuition that humans experience when they sense forces beyond comprehension. She was at once guardian and guide, reminding mortals that life is fragile, that knowledge is partial, and that some truths are revealed only in stillness and attentiveness. To the ancient Greeks, the veil between worlds was a living presence, as real as the soil beneath their feet or the sun that warmed their fields. Spirits of the dead lingered in shadowed corners, echoes of departed lives whose memory had not yet faded. Hecate moved among them with care, guiding, observing, and sometimes intervening. She was not vengeful, nor was she indifferent. She was attentive, her vigilance a testament to the intricate balance between mortality and eternity, between human fear and divine order. Rituals dedicated to Hecate at these liminal spaces reveal a sophisticated understanding of the human psyche. Torches illuminated offerings, incense rose to mingle with night air, and coins or small morsels of food were left as gestures of acknowledgement. The living reached across the veil to honor her presence, to seek guidance, and to negotiate the uncertainties of life. In these acts, Hecate became more than myth. She became a mediator, a tangible bridge between what is seen and what remains hidden. The psychological resonance of Hecate's veil is profound. Humans live constantly in the in-between, between safety and danger, certainty and doubt, memory and oblivion. The goddess embodies this tension, demonstrating that liminality is not a place of chaos alone, but a space of profound insight. In the quiet observation of boundaries, in the flicker of torchlight against the dark, the ancients glimpsed the fragile architecture of reality, that every life is threaded with thresholds, and that the unseen forces shaping our path are as potent as the visible. Hecate's connection to the veil also reveals her role as a guardian of knowledge. To cross thresholds without guidance is to invite peril. To navigate the unknown without respect is to court disaster. In myths, she is patient yet exacting, offering insight to those who approach with humility and preparedness. Her triple aspect, sky, earth, and underworld, reinforces this, for each realm carries its own risks, its own lessons, and its own forms of revelation. She teaches that understanding is iterative, layered, and earned through attentiveness rather than force. Artists and storytellers depicted her at the edges of vision, in shadows and moonlight, with torches illuminating her passage. Dogs, silent and watchful, accompanied her as guardians of the veil. Keys and daggers, symbols of access and restriction, further define the delicate balance of her dominion. Each element reflects the broader truth she embodies, that to navigate life's mysteries is to recognize limits, to honor thresholds, and to respect forces beyond immediate perception. Even today the veil persists. It exists in the moments of hesitation before a decision, in the quiet contemplation of mortality, in the fleeting awareness of forces beyond understanding. Hecate's presence at the edges of perception endures, reminding us that the liminal is sacred, that fear and awe coexist, and that wisdom requires patience, vigilance, and reverence. In the deep silence of twilight, as stars ignite the heavens and shadows deepen across the earth, Hecate moves between realms. She inhabits the veil itself, observing, guiding, and waiting. In her quiet mastery of the in-between, we learn an ancient truth, that life's most profound lessons are found not in what is seen, but in what lies just beyond perception, in the gentle whisper of the worlds that brush against our own. Time is a slow and silent sculptor, shaping perception as much as it shapes memory. Hecate, once honored at crossroads and tombs, guardian of thresholds and guide to souls, did not escape this slow transformation. As centuries passed and cultures shifted, her image darkened. Reverence gave way to suspicion, sacred ritual to superstition, and the goddess who once illuminated choice became, in many tales, a figure of fear. Yet even in this change, there is meaning, a reflection of humanity's uneasy relationship with power, mystery, and the unknown. In the classical period, Hecate's presence was largely respected and even revered. She was honored in Athens in small shrines, in rituals that recognized her as a protective force, a mediator between worlds. But as Hellenistic culture spread and Roman influence grew, her role began to be reframed. The divine feminine, autonomous and liminal, posed a subtle threat to emerging patriarchal norms. She became associated with witchcraft, with night, with shadowed practices. What had been a symbol of guidance and vigilance became, slowly and quietly, a symbol of danger and moral ambiguity. This transformation was not abrupt, nor was it uniform. In some accounts, Hecate remained a powerful but benevolent figure. In others, she became an agent of vengeance, an accomplice to human transgression. The very qualities that made her a guardian of thresholds, independence, ambiguity, intimacy with the unknown, were reframed as unnatural, unsettling, or threatening. To cross into her domain without respect was to risk not only misfortune, but the judgment of a goddess now seen through the lens of fear. In this way, myth and morality entwined, revealing the tension between human imagination and cultural power structures. Her association with witchcraft became central to her evolving narrative. Witches were often women on the margins, healers and seers whose knowledge and agency unsettled societal norms. Hecate, already connected to liminality, night, and hidden wisdom, became their patron in popular imagination. To invoke her was to tap into forbidden knowledge, to traverse paths considered dangerous, to enter spaces culturally coded as morally ambiguous. In transforming Hecate into a figure of shadow, society codified its fear of autonomy, of female power, and of the unpredictable nature of the unknown. Yet beneath this transformation lies a deeper continuity. Hecate's essence, her command over thresholds, her intimate knowledge of life and death, her guidance in moments of uncertainty, remained intact. The stories of demons, witches, and nocturnal terror are shadows cast by human perception, not erasures of her power. They are evidence that the sacred is often inseparable from the frightening, that wisdom can provoke suspicion, and that respect for liminality is easily misinterpreted as threat. In every tale of darkness and danger, one can trace the faint torchlight of her original role. The one who watches, who guides, and who observes the balance between worlds. Her iconography too shifted to reflect this reinterpretation. Dogs, once loyal companions illuminating hidden paths, became symbols of haunting and feral terror. Torches cast more menacing shadows than light. Keys implied secretive plots rather than unlocked mysteries. The triple form, once a celebration of multiplicity and perception, was read as a sign of otherness, a marker of the uncanny, a symbol of what is beyond comprehension. Art and myth alike reflected the anxieties of the cultures that remembered her, revealing less about Hecate herself and more about the fears of those who told her story. Yet even in demonization, Hecate endures. Her shadowed image continues to fascinate, to inspire awe, and to challenge the boundaries of understanding. She reminds us that fear is often a reflection of ignorance, that cultural memory is selective, and that power, when misunderstood, can appear threatening. The goddess who once stood at crossroads and tombs, who guided the living and the dead alike, had become a mirror, a reflection of human trepidation toward what cannot be tamed or contained. As night settles over forests, tombs, and crossroads, Hecate's shadow stretches across time. She is neither wholly goddess nor entirely demon, but something more complex. A presence that embodies the paradoxes of human perception, the tension between reverence and fear, the enduring power of the liminal. In this evolution, we see not the diminishment of her being, but the amplification of her significance. A reminder that those who navigate the thresholds between worlds, whether mortal or divine, are never free from the gaze of history, nor from the shadows cast by memory. In the quiet spaces where shadow meets perception, symbols hold power. They are more than mere objects. They are vessels of meaning, bridges between the tangible and the unseen. Hecate, the goddess of thresholds and liminality, communicated through such signs, leaving traces in torches, keys, daggers, and dogs. Each of these symbols carries a story, a whisper of instruction, and a reminder that the unseen forces guiding human life are never entirely inaccessible, but they demand attentiveness, respect, and reverence. The torch is perhaps the most vivid of her signs. In the darkness of crossroads, groves, and tombs, torches illuminate both the physical path and the inner terrain of the human mind. They cast shadows as well as light, revealing obstacles and possibilities, choices and consequences. To carry a torch in Hecate's honor was not merely to hold fire, but to engage in a dialogue with uncertainty, to navigate spaces where fear and insight coexist. The flame, fragile and flickering, mirrors the fragility of knowledge and the human condition itself, temporary, brilliant, and subject to the winds of circumstance. Keys, another of her enduring symbols, speak to access and revelation. They are instruments of passage, capable of unlocking doors between worlds, between ignorance and understanding, between life and death. In ritual, the key becomes a tangible acknowledgement of liminality, a recognition that some thresholds are closed to the careless or unprepared. To possess or offer a key in her name was to acknowledge the delicate architecture of reality, that human perception is limited, and that guidance, like knowledge, must be earned with attention, humility, and respect. Daggers, too, carry layered meaning. They are tools of precision, instruments capable of protection or harm, and metaphors for discernment. In Hecate's symbolism, the dagger reflects the necessity of careful navigation in a world filled with unseen forces. It is a reminder that boundaries must sometimes be defended, that crossing thresholds carries responsibility, and that the unseen, though often silent, has consequences that ripple across life and memory. Dogs, ever watchful companions of the goddess, embody vigilance, loyalty, and perception beyond the ordinary. In myth and art, they patrol the edges of human understanding, traversing spaces where mortals cannot follow, bridging the worlds of the living and the dead. Their presence signals that the unseen is never entirely inaccessible, but it is also never entirely safe. Hecate's dogs guide, guard, and accompany those willing to engage with liminality, ensuring that thresholds are crossed with awareness, not recklessness. Together, these symbols form a network of meaning, a system of guidance that transcends words. They are mnemonic devices, psychological anchors, and ritual tools that allow humans to interact with the divine. Through them, mortals are reminded that life exists in layers, seen and unseen, light and shadow, certainty and doubt. Hecate's symbols teach that understanding is never immediate, that insight is often mediated by ritual, observation, and respect for the delicate balance of forces surrounding each choice. The potency of these symbols is evident in the longevity of her worship. Across centuries, offerings at crossroads, tokens placed at graves, and depictions in art convey a continuity of human recognition. That power and meaning are inseparable from the structures that shape perception. Hecate does not act arbitrarily. She acts through signs. Her influence is encoded in objects, gestures, and practices that bridge the gap between mortal fear and divine knowledge. Yet symbols in the dark are not only instruments of guidance. They are mirrors of the human psyche. They reflect our fears, our hopes, our curiosity, and our longing for understanding. The torch, key, dagger, and dog are simultaneously tools and teachers, reminding the living that the world is layered, mysterious, and alive with forces beyond comprehension. Hecate's presence is felt in every shadow, every flicker of light, every hidden threshold, a quiet insistence that attention, awareness, and reverence are the only paths through the darkness. In the hush of night, as torches illuminate crossroads and tombs, her symbols persist. They mark spaces where choices must be made, where the living confront the unseen, and where memory and myth intertwine. In every key left on stone, every dagger set upon the earth, every dog prowling in the shadows, Hecate speaks. She is at once protector and teacher, a presence whose guidance is subtle, whose power is profound, and whose symbols in the dark continue to illuminate the paths of those who dare to perceive the world beyond the visible. Ritual is the language of the unseen. It is the bridge between the mortal and the divine, between what can be touched and what must be intuited. For Hecate, rituals were not mere routines or superstitions. They were acts of reverence, acts that acknowledged the presence of thresholds, the fragility of life, and the inevitability of death. In the flicker of torchlight, at the quiet intersections of roads and tombs, mortals engaged with her, shaping memory and destiny with gestures both simple and profound. Each offering, each whispered prayer, each carefully placed token carried meaning beyond the immediate. It was a dialogue with forces that endure long after the human voice has fallen silent. To understand Hecate's rituals is to glimpse the psychology of the ancient world. At crossroads, small altars bore eggs, cakes, and wine, each item symbolic, each act deliberate. The triple nature of her being, maiden, mother, crone, earth, sky, underworld, informed these gestures. Offerings were often made in threes, a reflection of her multiplicity and of the layered structure of reality she governs. Through ritual, mortals sought her guidance, protection, and insight. They acknowledged that life is punctuated by thresholds, that fate is shaped by choices, and that memory, both personal and collective, is sacred. Memory itself was ritualized. To leave offerings was to remember, to mark a moment in time, and to embed the divine into the cadence of daily life. Hecate's presence at tombs and graves ensured that the dead were not forgotten, that their journey between worlds was witnessed and guided. Crossroads, too, became repositories of memory. travelers paused to honor her, leaving objects that encoded hope, fear, and gratitude. Each act of remembrance was a negotiation with the invisible, a recognition that life and death, seen and unseen, coexist in delicate balance. The psychological resonance of these rituals is profound. Humans have always sought ways to anchor themselves amid uncertainty. Hecate's rites offered structure, focus, and a tangible connection to forces otherwise imperceptible. They provided a framework in which fear could be tempered by understanding, where the weight of the unknown could be approached with care, and where the fleeting power of the human hand could meet the enduring presence of the divine. Through these acts, mortals internalized lessons about vigilance, responsibility, and the consequences of crossing thresholds without respect. Ritual also mediates cultural memory. Across generations, practices dedicated to Hecate preserved knowledge about life, death, and liminality. They encoded societal values, philosophical insights, and cosmological understanding in forms accessible to ordinary mortals. In honoring her, humans acknowledged the structure of the cosmos, the continuity of life, and the delicate threads connecting all existence. In this way, Hecate became more than a goddess. She became a repository of collective consciousness, a figure through whom the wisdom of ancestors could endure. Symbols played a crucial role in ritual. Torches illuminated altars, revealing offerings and casting shadows that evoked her presence. Keys suggested access to hidden wisdom, daggers marked the careful defense of thresholds, and dogs patrolled liminal spaces as guardians. These objects were more than props. They were conduits, allowing mortals to interact with forces beyond perception. In their careful placement, the act of memory became inseparable from the act of devotion. The interplay of ritual and memory also reflects the human desire for continuity. In a world shaped by mortality, uncertainty, and change, ritual offers permanence. Through repeated acts of devotion, humans anchor themselves in cycles of understanding, connecting past, present, and future. Hecate, ever present at thresholds, ensures that these cycles are respected, that memory endures, and that the wisdom of liminality is never lost. Even today, traces of these rituals persist. Modern interpretations, folklore, and remnants of ancient practice testify to the enduring impact of Hecate's guidance. The torches, keys, and offerings remain symbols of human engagement with thresholds, markers of respect for what cannot be fully known, and reminders that memory is a sacred conduit between the mortal and the divine. In the quiet spaces of the night, where crossroads meet shadow and tombs whisper in the dark, Hecate's rituals endure. They are the subtle threads that connect life and death, human and divine, memory and meaning. And in each gesture, each offering, and each act of remembrance, we glimpse an ancient truth: that to honor thresholds, to recognize liminality, and to engage with the unseen is to participate in a dialogue that transcends time, a conversation that shapes both the living and the dead. Night has always held a particular sway over the human imagination. In darkness, the familiar dissolves, shapes lengthen, and every sound is amplified with uncertainty. It is in these hours, when the world seems suspended between one breath and the next, that Hecate is most present. She is the night walker, moving silently through shadowed groves, along quiet roads, and at the edges of villages where torches flicker but cannot fully dispel the darkness. In her passage, there is neither threat nor indulgence, only a patient observation, an intimate knowledge of fear, and a guidance that is both subtle and profound. To the ancients, the night was not simply the absence of sun. It was a liminal space in which the boundaries between life and death, known and unknown, were thinnest. Hecate's dominion over these hours underscores her role as a goddess of thresholds. She did not merely dwell in darkness. She moved through it, illuminating what was necessary to perceive and concealing what was not yet ready to be understood. Her presence in the night reflects the human need to navigate uncertainty with care, to respect what is hidden, and to recognize that insight often comes in the quiet, patient observation of subtle signs. The rituals associated with Hecate's nocturnal aspect were intimate and deliberate. At the edge of town, on the border of forest, or beneath the pale light of a waning moon, offerings of food, incense, and small tokens were left. Torches were lit not to conquer the night, but to engage with it, a recognition that darkness is not mere absence, but a space of potential, reflection, and revelation. Dogs, her companions, patrolled these peripheries, their keen senses attuned to the movements of spirits and the hidden stirrings of the living. In these rites, mortals acknowledged that the night was not empty. It was alive, attentive, and under Hecate's watch, pregnant with guidance. The night walker is also a psychological figure. Darkness evokes fear, uncertainty, and introspection. Hecate embodies the necessary tension between caution and curiosity, between vigilance and trust. By walking through the night, she demonstrates that wisdom is inseparable from attention, and that survival, physical, emotional, and spiritual, depends on recognizing what is hidden rather than attempting to dominate it. Her torches illuminate not only paths in the forest or along the road, but the hidden corridors of the human mind. Fears unspoken, desires unacknowledged, and intuition waiting to be heeded. Artistic depictions of Hecate at night emphasize this duality. Torches and keys remain central, symbols of illumination and access. Dogs remain faithful guardians of liminal spaces. Shadows, cast long and strange by flickering flame, create a landscape that is at once real and symbolic. In each image, one sees the nightwalker's vigilance and the quiet authority of her guidance. The darkness is not malevolent. It is a teacher, and Hecate its mediator. She transforms fear into awareness, uncertainty into insight, and shadow into a space where the human imagination may safely engage with the unknown. Her nocturnal presence is also a reflection of mortality and memory. The night mirrors the unconscious, the hidden realms of thought and experience that humans seldom confront during the clarity of day. Hecate guides the living through this darkness with care, reminding them that engagement with the unknown is necessary, and that boundaries, both literal and symbolic, must be respected. To follow her in the night is to acknowledge one's fragility, to navigate uncertainty with attention, and to recognize that wisdom is inseparable from humility. Even in modern imagination, Hecate persists as the nightwalker. She haunts folklore, literature, and art, a symbol of the liminal hours of intuition and of the careful journey through spaces unseen. She teaches that the night is not simply to be feared, but to be observed, honored, and traversed with awareness. In every shadowed grove, every silent path, and every flickering torchlight, her presence endures. And so, as darkness deepens and the stars ignite overhead, Hecate moves silently, the nightwalker eternal. She watches over the boundaries between worlds, over the living and the dead, over fear and courage alike. In her passage, humans are reminded that the night is both teacher and companion, and that those who respect its quiet authority may glimpse truths hidden from the light of day. In the stillness of night, Hecate walks, and in her walking, the living learn patience, reverence, and the enduring power of thresholds. Thresholds are more than mere entrances or exits. They are places of transition, spaces where one world ends and another begins, and where the familiar brushes against the unknown. Hecate, above all, is the guardian of these spaces. She stands at the liminal, at doorways, tombs, crossroads, and the unseen passages that mark the boundary between life and death, safety and peril, knowledge and mystery. In every threshold, she observes, she guides, and she silently reminds mortals of the weight and consequence inherent in crossing. In the ancient world, thresholds were imbued with significance. A doorway into a home was not simply an entry. It was a portal where the domestic intersected with the sacred. A crossroads was not simply a meeting of paths. It was a space where choices carried more than immediate consequence. They resonated into the invisible threads of fate. Hecate's presence at these spaces was both protective and instructive. She did not force, nor did she dictate. She illuminated what required attention, watched the hesitant traveler, and maintained the fragile balance between mortal audacity and divine oversight. Her guardianship was ritualized and symbolic. Offerings left at doorways, at crossroads, and at tombs were not merely superstitions. They were acknowledgments of the sacred architecture of reality. Eggs, honey, incense, and torches became markers, not just of devotion, but of attentiveness to the unseen. Keys were laid to represent access, daggers to signify protection, and dogs patrolled the periphery as silent witnesses. In these acts, mortals recognized that thresholds are not neutral. They are charged with consequence, and their crossing demands awareness and reverence. Hecate's role as keeper of the threshold also reflects a profound psychological truth. Every human life is defined by transitions. Birth is a threshold. Coming of age is a threshold. Death is a threshold. Every choice, every moral decision, every moment of hesitation or courage marks the crossing from one state into another. Hecate embodies this principle, reminding humans that thresholds are never empty. They are spaces where insight is available, where fear is confronted, and where growth is possible. In her gaze, mortals learn that reverence for liminality is inseparable from understanding the fragility and responsibility of life. Artistic depictions reinforce her mastery over thresholds. Torches illuminate paths and doorways, keys hang at her belt, daggers glint in the flickering light, and dogs remain ever watchful at the edge of perception. These symbols are not merely decorative. They are tools and lessons, teaching mortals the subtle skill of navigating change. Shadows cast by her torches suggest the multiplicity of experience. Every step forward carries risk and reward, every path diverges into consequence, and every transition is both opportunity and test. Hecate's guardianship is also ethical. Crossing a threshold without respect, whether literal or metaphorical, invites imbalance, misfortune, or harm. Her role is to maintain the boundary, to guide those who approach with care, and to observe those who act with arrogance. In doing so, she exemplifies the principle that liminality is sacred, and that wisdom lies in recognition, patience, and attentiveness. The human mind, prone to impatience and desire, is reminded through her vigilance that understanding is earned, not assumed, and that reverence for the threshold is inseparable from survival and insight. Even in the transformations of her image across history, from revered goddess to feared witch's patron, her essence as keeper of thresholds endures. She is present wherever transitions are navigated, in moments of mourning, in the quiet deliberation before choices, in journeys both literal and spiritual. Hecate's authority is subtle, yet absolute. She is neither tyrant nor idle, but a guardian who teaches the necessity of humility, vigilance, and respect for the spaces between worlds. And so, in the hush of twilight, at the edges of villages, forests, and tombs, Hecate stands. She watches over those who approach thresholds, illuminating what is necessary, concealing what is not yet ready, and maintaining the delicate balance between the visible and invisible. In her quiet mastery, the living learn that each crossing is sacred, each choice consequential, and that the spaces between worlds are governed not by chance, but by the watchful presence of the eternal keeper of the threshold. Time, like a slow river, carries all things away, yet some presences endure beyond memory, beyond death, and beyond the shifting sands of culture. Hecate is one such presence. She is the eternal watcher, the silent sentinel who observes the boundaries between worlds, between light and shadow, life and death, knowledge and mystery. Her gaze is patient, impartial, and ceaseless. In the stillness of twilight, when the world pauses and shadows deepen, she reminds humanity that the unseen is never absent, that thresholds are never neutral, and that reverence is the bridge to understanding what lies just beyond perception. Her eternity is not a matter of power alone, but of relevance. Across centuries, civilizations have risen and fallen, languages have vanished, and empires have crumbled into dust, yet Hecate remains. She is present at crossroads where travelers pause, at tombs where the dead linger in memory, in the quiet spaces of the mind where intuition stirs and the unknown whispers. She endures not because she is untouched by history, but because her domain, liminality, thresholds, and the unseen, is woven into the very structure of human existence. Wherever humans confront uncertainty, she walks beside them, guiding, observing, and preserving the delicate balance between courage and fear, insight and ignorance. To witness Hecate is to confront a paradox. She is both comforting and unsettling, protector and examiner, familiar and unknowable. Mortals call upon her for guidance, yet she demands attentiveness, patience, and respect. Her torches light the paths of the living, her keys unlock both doors and understanding, and her dogs patrol the edges of perception, bridging the worlds of the seen and unseen. In her eternal vigilance, she embodies the wisdom that thresholds are sacred, that liminality is a crucible of insight, and that every step into the unknown carries consequence. Hecate's endurance is also symbolic of memory itself. She preserves the echoes of the past, the practices, beliefs, and fears of ancestors who recognized the necessity of honoring the unseen. Through ritual, symbol, and myth, she becomes a conduit, a repository for collective human consciousness. In every offering at a crossroads, in every whispered prayer at a tomb, her presence is acknowledged, and through that acknowledgement, the lessons of liminality and reverence endure. She teaches that continuity is not merely survival, but attentive engagement, that immortality is found not in domination but in the careful stewardship of thresholds. Even as interpretations shift across time, from revered goddess to witch's patron, from guide to figure of dread, her essence remains intact. The shadow of fear and the flame of insight are inseparable within her being, reminding humanity that the sacred often dwells at the edge of understanding. Hecate is a mirror of our own perceptions, fears, and aspirations. She is eternal because she embodies the constant presence of choice, consequence, and threshold in human life, a reminder that the worlds we traverse, both seen and unseen, are intertwined, and that the vigilant observer of boundaries is indispensable. Her story, like her essence, is liminal. She exists between myth and history, between religion and folklore, between imagination and lived experience. Hecate is both a record and a teacher. She reveals how cultures perceive fear, wisdom, and mortality, how humans navigate uncertainty and negotiate the boundaries of knowledge, and how reverence for the unseen ensures the survival of insight across generations. To acknowledge Hecate is to participate in this continuum, to recognize the sacred architecture of the world, and to understand that the eternal watcher is never absent, only observed in those who look carefully enough. As twilight deepens and shadows lengthen, Hecate's torches flicker at crossroads, doorways, and tombs. Her dogs patrol silently, her keys hang ready to unlock unseen doors, and her presence is felt in the quiet pulse of liminal spaces. She teaches that life is defined as much by the spaces we cross as by the paths we travel. She reminds us that vigilance, reverence, and humility are the only guides through uncertainty. And in this quiet, eternal observation, humanity learns an ancient truth, that some presences are timeless because they embody thresholds themselves, because they are guardians of transitions, and because they remind us that the world is larger, stranger, and more sacred than it ever appears in the daylight of certainty. Hecate endures. She waits at the edge of perception, a constant witness, the eternal watcher. In her gaze, the living recognize the fragility of life, the weight of choice, and the quiet power of liminality. She is at once a guide, a guardian, and a reminder. Thresholds are sacred, the unseen is alive, and wisdom is found in walking deliberately, respectfully, and with attention toward the worlds that brush against our own.